Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am sorry for my absence, but I'm back now and I'm going to continue on with the Love Letter to America by Thomas Schuman, also known as Yuri Bezmenov, and this is session 4, I believe. Let's get right into it. Prelude to Subversion. All warfare is based primarily on deception of an enemy. Fighting on a battlefield is the most primitive way of making war. There is no art higher than to destroy your enemy without a fight, by subverting anything of value in enemy's country. That was from Sun Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, 500 BC. I want to add that this particular session probably, in my opinion, is one of the most important parts of this book. It goes into the tactics and each step of the subversion tactics that the Russians used in taking down multiple countries and what is currently going on in the United States today. But as it was said before, or as you know, Yuri had said before, is that it is no longer the Russians doing it to America, it is Americans doing it to Americans. It's just that constant thing going on through media, through the colleges and other schools, and all the way down to like even just the children. So let's get into this. The advantage of duping the masses into doing things on their own disadvantage and making them believe it is the will of the people is as ancient as mankind itself. The essence of subversion is best expressed in the famous Marxist slogan, "If you substitute proletarians for a more appropriate word, useful idiots of the world, unite!" To achieve the desired effect, the subverter must first make idiots out of normal people and divide them before turning the people into homogenized mass of useful and united idiots. Tanks and missiles may or may not be needed at final stage. For the time being, they are simply the means of terrorizing people into inaction and submission. 500 years before Christ, this Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu formulated the principle of subversion this way. 1. Cover with ridicule all of the valid traditions in your opponent's country. 2. Implicate their leaders in criminal affairs and turn them over to the scorn of their populace at the right time. 3. Disrupt the work of their government by every means. 4. Do not shun the aid of the lowest and most despicable individuals of your country's or of your enemy's country. 5. Spread disunity and dispute among the citizens. 6. Turn the young against the old. 7. Be generous with promises and rewards to collaborators and accomplices. Sound familiar? About 2,500 years later, we can read this very same instruction in a secret document allegedly authored by the Communist International for their young revolutionaries. The document is titled Rules of Revolution. My bad. 1. Corrupt the young and get them interested in sex, take them away from religion, and make them superficial and enfeebled. Number 2. Divide the people into hostile groups by constantly harping on controversial issues of no importance. 3. Destroy people's faith in their national leaders by holding the latter up for contempt, ridicule, and disgrace. 4. Always preach democracy, but seize power as fast and as ruthlessly as possible. Interesting. Number 5. By encouraging government extravagances, destroy its credit, produce years of inflation with rising prices and general discontent. 6. Incite unnecessary strikes in vital industries, encourage civil disorders, and foster a lenient and soft attitude on the part of the government towards such disorders. Wow, this kind of sounds a little familiar. 7. Cause breakdown of the old moral virtues: honesty, sobriety, self-restraint, faith in the pledged word. I cannot vouch for authenticity of this document, which, according to American conservative media, was captured by the Allied forces after World War II in defeated Germany in Dusseldorf. But I can assure you that these rules are almost a literal interpretation of those theories and practices which I learned from my KGB superiors and colleagues within the Novosti Press Agency. Yes, I am well aware of the possibility that nothing I write here is a sensational revelation to many of you. What I did was simply to structure my knowledge and experience with the Soviet subversion system into a simple and graphic record. To help you to get an overall picture of the subversion process, let me first outline for you the movement of a target nation from the state of open society to a closed one. This outline is taken from secret, not so secret, and absolutely non-secret Marxist literature. An open society is the one you're living in now. You can work in it or choose not to work in it, have private property or have nothing at all, love it or leave it, criticize it without fear of being declared an enemy of the people. It is a society based on free individual initiative and the free market system. All you have to do to screw up the status quo of the free nation is to borrow one false idea from the ideology of a communist or totalitarian government. For the sake of simplicity, I have chosen the idea of egalitarianism. People born equal, therefore, must be equal. Sounds great, but look at yourselves. Are you born equal? Some of you weighed 7 pounds at birth, others 6 or 5. Are you now equal in any way? Physically, mentally, emotionally, racially, spiritually? Some are tall and dumb. Others are short, bald, and clever. Now, let's figure out what will happen if we legislate equality and make it a concept of equality, a cornerstone and pillar of socioeconomical and political system. All right, you don't have to be a great economist or a sociologist to foresee that some of the people who are less equal would demand as much as those who are more equal by law. Now you've got it. There will be some who will get more for giving less and take advantage of those who are even less equal, saying that in the art of taking and to avoid the squabble for equal redistribution, you will have to introduce a third force, the state. Why? Because people were never equal, are not equal, and if God wanted us to be equal, he would have probably made us equal. No, he provided a difference. Vive la différence, said the French before the French Revolution, and they were right. The beauty of the best, most successful political economic system created by the fathers of America has nothing to do with the legislated or enforced equality. The American Republic is based on a principle of equal opportunities for unequal and very much different and diverse individuals to develop their abilities and to coexist mutually beneficial cooperation. And that it is an entirely different story that much I knew from the Soviet textbooks of American history. Now let's move faster. People who have declared themselves to be equal will inevitably come to expect more for their individual needs, which sooner or later will tragically come to conflict with the unequal reality. That will automatically produce discontent. Unhappy and discontented masses are less productive than those who are happy and being what they are and making the best of it. Decreased productivity, as we know, leads to such unpleasant things as inflation. unemployment, and recession. These, in turn, cause social unrest and instability, both economical and political. Chronic instability breeds radicalism as a means of solving problems. Radicalism is the precondition of a power struggle, which many, and as often, resulted in violent and forceful replacements of power structures. If the situation deteriorates badly, this replacement takes ugly forms of internal civil war, or revolution, or invasion of a friendly and fraternal neighbor, and finally ends up in the traditional way, namely state control. Depending on maturity of the nation, the amount or absence of common sense is control. This control will manifest itself in the creation of a closed society, the opposite of what we had in the beginning. Borders are closed, censorship of the media is established, irritants and enemies of the state are executed, etc. This is my simplistic and highly unscientific outline of the events which have happened in many countries of the world. Any nation is able to do this to herself without any help from comrades Andropov and Bezmenov and their numerous KGB agents. Any one of you can easily observe this vicious chain of events by simply reading your newspaper regularly or even watching the TV. And here we're going to move on to the 4 stages of subversion. And really quick, I wanted to show this, the movement from an open society to a closed society. And this was the process of which Yuri wrote out for us to see visually. The 4 stages of subversion. What many of you do not see is the second chain of events, which I graphically represented in the following chart. See page 22. Of the 4 stages of subversion. 1. Demoralization. 2. Destabilization. 3. Crisis. 4. Normalization. What has all of this to do with the KGB? Very simple. These are the most favorable conditions listed in any Marxist textbook of revolutionary struggle. I have simply placed them in a chronological order and divided them into 3 vertical columns: the areas of application, the methods of subversion, and the expected or achieved results. I have it here. You can see this is page 22. And this is what he's talking about right now. In the context of the USA, most of these nasty things are done to Americans by Americans with the ideological help of the communist subverters. Most of the actions are overt, legitimate, and easily identifiable. The only trouble is they are stretched in time. In other words, the process of subversion is such a long-term process that an average individual, due to the short time span of his historical memory, is unable to perceive the process of subversion as a consistent and willful effort. I will add this. You can, I guess, compare it to the throwing a frog in boiling water. It would jump out versus you put a frog in regular temperature water and then heat it up slowly and it'll boil itself to death or whatever. This is exactly how it is intended to be like a small hand of your watch. You know it moves, but you cannot see it moving. The main principle of the ideological subversion is turning a stronger force against itself. It is said that the United States will not fall to an outside force attacking it, that it will be destroyed from the inside out. And this is, I think, is what he's talking about, is turning a stronger force against itself. That's where it comes to. Americans doing the subversion to other Americans. Just like in the Japanese martial arts, you do not stop the blow of a heavier, more powerful enemy with the equally forceful blow. you may simply hurt your hand. Instead, you catch the striking fist with your hand and pull the enemy in the direction of his blow until he crashes into a wall or another heavy object in his way. America is obviously a stronger force that communism is unable to defeat, but it is possible to conquer this nation using the preconditions I have described, created by Americans themselves, and diverting America's attention away from these more mortally dangerous preconditions. The situation is similar to a house, the owners of which have stored explosives and inflammable materials inside. To destroy the house, the enemy does not have to intrude physically to do it. It is enough to start a fire next door and wait till the wind blows in the right direction. Meanwhile, the enemy may throw in some great ideas for the owners to argue about in order to take their attention off the actual fire. Environmental protection, gay liberation, or emancipation. The house pets are the types of non-critical arguments that divert America's attention from the real danger. Smart people will notice the fire and remove the inflammable objects and materials before the house catches fire. Useful idiots will keep arguing about whether it is constitutional or not to pay firefighters for the equality of husband and wife domestic chores, or who should remove the combustibles, until the actual explosion blows their enfeebled brains all over the neighborhood. Now let us get back to my chart. I know it is going to be somewhat boring, but my purpose is not to entertain you, but to explain what my former KGB bosses consider important for your liberation. Stage 1. Demoralization. This process has many names: psychological warfare, ideological aggression, propaganda warfare, etc. The KGB calls it active measures. Since my defection from the USSR embassy in 1970, I have been trying desperately to explain to the Western media, politicians, intelligence community, and your academic Sovietologists that active measures are more important and dangerous than classic espionage, the James Bond style. At long last, in 1983, in his new book, KGB Today, John Barron accurately and excellently described the process of demoralization based some of his analysis on the data supplied by another KGB defector, KGB official Stanislav Lefranok. Incidentally, my former schoolmate from the Oriental Studies Institute, who was later stationed in Tokyo, Japan under the guise of correspondence with New Time magazine. Stanislav Levchenko, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the names, succeeded where I failed. He brought the active measures to the attention of the American public. The purpose of this process is to change your perception of reality to such an extent that even despite the abundance of information and evidence about the danger of communism, you were unable to come to sensible conclusion in your own interests and in the interests of your nation. John Barron ominously titled the chapter of this book dedicated to analysis of active measures, Reality Upside Down. Excellent title. This is exactly what KGB gurus of subversion and novelty press agency taught me. One of the main tactics in this process is to develop, establish, and constantly enforce a set of double standards, one in relationship to the USSR, another to the USA. Western analysts have already pointed out the diverse tactics of active measures. Some of these were exactly the ones I was trained to use while working with foreign delegations in Moscow and the USSR Embassy in New Delhi. Overt and covert propaganda, use of agents of influence, faked international forums created by KGB/Novosti to bring atmosphere of legitimacy and respectability to Soviet operations, provoking and manipulating mass demonstrations and assemblies, spreading rumors and reliable information from circles close to Politburo forgeries of USA Information Services press releases, planting phony stories in local media, creating hundreds of tabloid newspapers subsidized by the USSR Embassy through front organizations and fake advertising. Let's see. Companies for the purpose of legally financing groups of subversives and radicals, etc. Other tactics such as sabotage, character assassination of stubborn Indians, resulting in Soviet subversion, terrorism, and even occasional killings of reactionaries and counter-revolutionaries for the psychological effect of paralyzing with fear. Those also were used by KGB colleagues from another department of the USSR Embassy. I am less familiar with these aspects of the subversion process. My role as a legitimate and overt public relations man and a charismatic socializer was directed by the KGB mainly at the initial stage of subversion. After a certain period of befriending and cultivating foreigners, I had to provide my KGB superior with my psychological assessment at the target individual or group and pass them over to professionals for further processing and recruitment. Nevertheless, I was able to reconstruct the overall picture of the process rather accurately, and unlike Western Sovietologists, come to more systematic and logical description of subversion. What I offer you now is a chart as simple as a multiplication table and as complex as calculus. This is the first time this chart has ever been published in its entirety. Let us start with first stage of demoralization. It takes about 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many of years or few? Simple. It is the minimum number of years needed to educate one generation of students in the target country, America, for example, and expose them to the ideology of the subverter. It is imperative that any sufficient challenge and counterbalance by the basic moral values and ideology of the country be eliminated. In absence of any cohesive and consistent national ideology, the task of the subverter becomes even easier. In the USA, as we all know, there is a multiplicity of these ideas and ideologies today, without proper emphasis on the main and basic American ideology of the original republic and the free market system. It is not even considered intellectual or fashionable these days to describe entirely to this outmoded set of ideas. To be successful, the process of subversion at the stage of demoralization must be always and only a two-way street, which means that the target nation must be made a recipient, passive or active, of the ideas of the subverter. Democracy is by definition a recipient of a multiplicity of ideologies and values, whether good or bad. Unfortunately, bad ideas are often proven and revealed only after a long period of time, during which many have absorbed them and allowed them to change their nation's attitudes and behavior. Ancient Japanese rulers understood this principle very well when they virtually isolated their nation from any foreign influence, good or bad or neutral. It didn't matter. Imperial Japan was preserved as its own set of historical values long enough to bring up mature, morally stable nation able to make the change to an entirely new technological civilization with negligible damage to national fiber. More than that, the Japanese, although reluctantly, opened up to Western values and surpassed the West in its shortest possible historical span since the World War II, becoming one of the greatest industrialized and technologically advanced powers of the world. Without such maturity, a nation may ill conceive even the most favorable foreign influence, which is clearly demonstrated by the number of decolonized third world countries prematurely embracing preliminary democracy. But if and when an outside influence is purposely ill-intended, an immature nation, or a nation with a neglected indigenous ideology, like America, automatically becomes recipient of subversion and is in its early stages of demoralization. Successful demoralization is irrevocable process that at least for another generation. Why? Let's take an example, the simplest approach. The semi-illiterate and unstable American generation of the crazy 1960s now approaching the age of 40. These people who were too preoccupied with protesting the Vietnam War, the drug/rock music scene, taking part in love-ins, etc., to study and prepare for assuming their civil responsibilities, are now in positions of power and decision-making in government, businesses, media, social life, entertainment, Hollywood, military, and intelligence services. Not all of them? Okay. Some of them are. You are stuck with them until they retire or resign. You cannot fire them. It is against union regulations. You cannot, unlike USSR, send them to Alaska after declaring themselves enemies of the people. You cannot even openly and effectively criticize them. They have invaded the media and control public opinion. Unless you want to be called a McCarthyist, you cannot change the attitudes and mores. At this age, people are usually set in their ways as individuals. You are stuck with them. They change your attitudes and opinions. They navigate the domestic and foreign affairs. They are making the decisions and choices for you, whether you like it or not. To change the direction of America's future and to return to the most basic American values, proven to be efficient and productive for almost 200 years of historically unprecedented freedom and affluence, you have to educate a new generation of Americans, this time in the spirit of patriotism and capitalism. All right, you don't want to return. You'd rather have something new and progressive and constructive to make America once again respected and loved all over the world, so that the recipients of the U.S. Suspected and loved recipients of the U.S. aid no longer shout "Yankees go home." In case, even if you start the education of a new generation of Americans right this minute, it will take you the next 15 to 20 years to raise this new generation to the levels of power and authority. You may reduce the period of time you can make an enormous all-nation effort in an atmosphere of prevailing unity and consensus. It will take a miracle or another national disaster, such as a new world war, God forbid, to make Americans embrace one American ideology and to act in one direction after decades of disunity, dispute, partisan antagonism, and self-castination. Therefore, let's be realistic. The demoralization, whether self-inflicted or imported, is usually an irreversible, for one generation at least, process. That is all for tonight. I apologize for stumbling around so much. I have a lot of this book underlined, and some of my marks have obscured some words, so it looks like this here. There's all kinds of underlining and things, notes made in other previous pages. Anyway, on the next reading, it will be the 3 levels of demoralization, and then we will continue on after that. Thank you and have a great day.